You think suicide pills disappeared when Berlin fell? Glass vials, potassium cyanide, the quick way out for Nazis who knew what waited, Nuremberg trials, Soviet interrogation rooms, rope? Where did they go? Who controlled them? What happened to the stockpiles after May 1945? This isn't about one capsule smuggled to Hermann Göring in a fountain pen. This is about a poison pipeline that stretched from Hamburg to Berlin, from SS headquarters to concentration camps, from the Führer bunker to provincial mayors. Small brass tubes stamped with contract numbers, pea-sized glass ampules, death you could carry in your pocket. And when the Third Reich collapsed in rubble and ash, those capsules didn't vanish. They scattered. Some ended up in Allied evidence rooms. Some got swallowed. Some are still in museum cases today. But the question nobody asks is this: were there ever organized Gestapo stocks to begin with? Or did the poison flow through different hands entirely? Dive in. The truth is stranger than the conspiracy. If you value documented history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Imperial War Museums, physical collections of seized German suicide capsules dating to 1939, published articles in the European Journal of Internal Medicine from 2018 on Hitler's death, and declassified U.S. National Archives records from Record Group 263 on Heinrich Müller and the Gestapo, released August 2016. Now back to the information. Spring 1945. Berlin is burning. Soviet artillery pounds the city to dust. In the Führer bunker, 55 feet below the Chancellery Garden, Adolf Hitler hands out glass capsules like party favors. His secretaries get them. His cook gets one. Eva Braun gets hers on April 29th, the day before they marry. The capsules come from Heinrich Himmler personally, small glass tubes, rubber-coated to prevent accidental breakage, filled with liquid potassium cyanide. Bite down, swallow, 15 minutes maximum. Hitler doesn't trust them. He tests one on his dog, Blondie, an Alsatian he's had since 1941, on April 30th. The dog dies fast. Hitler shoots himself anyway, belt and suspenders, because he's paranoid the cyanide is fake. Eva Braun takes hers alone, April 30th. 1945. Their bodies are burned in the garden with petrol while Soviet shells land 200 meters away. The capsules don't come from some secret Gestapo warehouse. They're manufactured by private companies. Tesch and Stabenow in Hamburg, Degisch in Dessau. The same firms that produce Zyklon B, hydrogen cyanide pellets used in the gas chambers at Auschwitz and Majdanek to murder 1.1 million people. Zyklon B and suicide capsules are chemical cousins. Both use hydrogen cyanide. Both kill by stopping cells from using oxygen. The difference is delivery. Zyklon B releases gas when exposed to air. The L-pill, lethal pill, is liquid potassium cyanide sealed in glass. British intelligence uses the same design for their own agents. Gray rubber coating, pea-size. The Imperial War Museums in London still have German examples marked Zied 1939 Einweg, etched on brass cartridge casings used as containers. These aren't Gestapo exclusive, they're SS issue, distributed to high-ranking officials, intelligence operatives, and anyone who might face capture. No centralized stockpile, no poison armory, just individual distribution through SS supply channels. April 12, 1945, the Berlin Philharmonic gives its last concert. The hall is packed despite the Soviet advance. Members of the Hitler Youth move through the crowd handing out cyanide pills. Witnesses report hundreds distributed. No one tracks how many are used. Berlin's suicide rate explodes. 3,881 confirmed suicides in April 1945 alone during the Battle of Berlin. The real number is higher. Chaos, mass graves, unidentified bodies. More than 7,000 total suicides reported in Berlin for all of 1945. The records are incomplete. The capsules flow from multiple sources, some from SS stocks, some from pharmaceutical supplies, some manufactured locally in the final weeks. Cyanide isn't rare, it's industrial. Used in electroplating, gold extraction, fumigation, photography. Any decent chemistry lab can produce potassium cyanide. The Nazis don't need a secret factory. They have Tesch and Stabenow operating openly under contract SS 77/42. That's the marking on original containers. After the war, Bruno Tesch and Karl Weinbacher of Tesch and Stabenow are tried by a British military court. They're convicted of knowingly providing Zyklon B for use on humans. Hanged May 16, 1946. But the cyanide capsule operation isn't part of the trial. It's not illegal. Suicide pills for military and intelligence use fall into a gray zone. The British used them. The Americans developed them. The CIA later experiments with saxitoxin in the 1950s as a replacement because cyanide gas can leak from capsules and kill the wrong person. May 1945. Germany surrenders. Nazi leaders scatter. Some flee, some fight, most kill themselves. Heinrich Himmler is captured by British forces. May 21. He's traveling in disguise with false papers. During a medical examination, May 23rd at Lüneburg, he bites down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his mouth. Dead in 15 minutes. A doctor tries to intervene, forces his mouth open, but Himmler bites through the glass. The Allies expect this. They've seen it before. Hermann Göring, Luftwaffe commander, carries a brass container throughout his capture. The Allies search him thoroughly. They search him again. They miss it. For 11 months at Nuremberg, Göring sits through his war crimes trial. He's convicted October 1st, 1946, sentenced to hang October 15th. The night before execution, he takes his capsule. Glass shards on his lips when they find him. Dead at 22:44. How did Göring keep poison through 11 months of imprisonment? Multiple theories. His suicide note claims he hid it in a jar of hair cream, then moved it between his alimentary tract and behind his toilet rim. Possible, but unlikely. More credible, it's smuggled in. Herbert Lee Stivers, a 19-year-old American guard, comes forward in 2005. Claims a German girl named Mona convinced him to deliver a vial hidden in a fountain pen. He thought it was medicine. He was trying to impress her. Mona introduced him to two men, Eric and Matthias, who said Göring was sick and needed medication. Stivers handed over the pen. 2 weeks later, Göring was dead. Stivers. Our story has holes. Other theories exist. But the key point, someone wanted Göring dead before he could testify further. The capsule either survived with him or came from outside. Where are the stockpiles? There are no stockpiles. This is the misconception. The Gestapo doesn't maintain a central poison depot. Individual SS officers carry capsules issued through supply chains. When Berlin falls, those individuals either use them or lose them. Odilo Globoknik. SS commander responsible for Operation Reinhard, the systematic murder of over 2 million Jews in occupied Poland, is captured by American soldiers, May 31st, 1945, at 4 a.m. in Austria. He holds a cyanide capsule under his tongue for hours. Swallows it at 11:25 a.m., dead in minutes. Robert Ritter von Grime, Luftwaffe Field Marshal, takes his on May 24th in Salzburg while in American custody. Richard Glucks, concentration camp inspector, swallows his on May 10th at the Murvik Naval Base in Flensburg. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, dies of cyanide poisoning May 2nd. DNA testing in 1998 confirms it. Eva Braun, Joseph Goebbels, and his wife Magda on May 1st, after murdering their 6 children with crushed cyanide tablets. The list goes on. At least 20 high-ranking Nazis die by cyanide between April and May 1945. Each one carries their own capsule. No requisition from a central armory, no Gestapo quartermaster handing out poison. The capsules are personal equipment, like a sidearm or an SS dagger. Issued once, carried always. When the regime collapses, those capsules go with their owners, used immediately, hidden in clothing, swallowed as Allied soldiers approach, found later in pockets of corpses. The question isn't what happened to Gestapo stocks. It's what happened to thousands of individual capsules distributed across the Wehrmacht, SS, Gestapo, and Nazi Party leadership over 12 years. Some end up in Allied hands. The Imperial War Museum's catalog shows examples seized from German personnel. One brown plastic jewelry box labeled Cyanide, potassium cyanide in German, contains 2 small white metal vials, one empty, one reportedly still containing a capsule. It belonged to a Jewish émigré-s father, suggesting he kept it as insurance against capture during the Nazi years. Museums across Europe and North America hold similar pieces, physical evidence of a distributed system, not a centralized stock. The Americans seized German chemical weapons in massive quantities, 296,100 tons total. That's Zyklon B, mustard gas, tabun, sarin, nerve agents stockpiled but never used in combat. The Continental Committee on Dumping decides in 1945 to destroy it all. Limited options. Building destruction facilities is expensive. Burial risks, groundwater contamination. Open burning is inefficient. They choose sea disposal, dump it in water at least 300 feet deep, 10 miles from shore. By December 1945, the requirement increases to 6,000 feet. Thousands of tons of chemical weapons are loaded onto ships and dumped in the Atlantic, North Sea, and Baltic. But cyanide capsules? They're not in that count. They're too small, too distributed, too personal to round up systematically. Some capsules surface decades later. In 2011, The Deseret Chemical Depot in Utah destroys its final stockpile of Nazi nerve agent, 4,100 pounds, seized by U.S. troops from Germany in 1945, stored in bulk containers for 66 years, destroyed under the Chemical Weapons Convention. But that's Tabun and Sarin, not Capsules. The Capsules are different, less industrial, more intimate. They're in coat pockets, suitcases, buried in gardens, forgotten in attics, occasionally found by metal detector enthusiasts in former Nazi headquarters. April in 1945. Soviet forces capture the Gestapo headquarters at Prince Albrechtstrasse in Berlin. The buildings are bombed, ruined, but still standing. Inside they find files, torture cells, interrogation equipment, no cyanide stockpile. The Gestapo's last chief, Heinrich Müller, disappears the same week. Last seen May 1st in the Führer bunker. His body is never conclusively identified. In 2013, the head of the Memorial to the German Resistance claims Müller's remains were found in August 1945 among 3,000 bodies in a mass grave at a former Jewish cemetery in Berlin-Mitte. DNA testing never confirms it. Some historians believe Müller defected to the Soviets. Others think he escaped to South America, or he took cyanide like the rest. Either way, if he had poison, he carried it himself. The Nuremberg trials exposed the poison pipeline indirectly. Prosecutors present evidence of Zyklon B production. Tesch and Stabenow records show 56 tons of 729 tons sold in Germany from 1942 to 44 went to concentration camps, 8% of domestic sales. Auschwitz alone received 23.8 tons, 6 tons for fumigation. The rest for murder. The same companies made the suicide capsules, but those records are incomplete. Production numbers are never disclosed. Distribution lists don't survive. The SS destroys files in the final weeks. The best estimate comes from usage patterns. If at least 30 high-ranking Nazis used capsules between April and June 1945, and lower-ranking officials had access, and distribution began in the late 1930s. Thousands of capsules, minimum, maybe tens of thousands. No one counted, no one tracked. It wasn't a strategic weapons program. It was a personal insurance policy against the consequences of war crimes. What the Allies find instead are documents, shipping manifests for Zyklon B, contracts between Dagesh and the SS, invoices. But the capsule trade is smaller, quieter. It doesn't require factories, just small-scale pharmaceutical production. Any competent chemist can make potassium cyanide. The Imperial War Museum's example from 1939 shows the Germans were producing them before the war even started. That means at least 6 years of continuous, low-level manufacture. Not mass production, not industrial scale, just enough to supply the inner circle. By 1946, the capsule trail goes cold. The major users are dead. The manufacturers are tried or shut down. Dagesh continues operating post-war under new names, Dedia Dagesh today, but only for legitimate pesticide production. The brass containers become collector's items. Replicas are sold online today as historical reproductions, marked Tesh U, Stabenow, Hamburg, SS, 77/42. The originals are in museums or private collections. The glass ampules are empty. The poison neutralized, the brass tarnished but intact. 79 years later, they're relics, evidence of a system where death was standard issue. The American military adopts the concept. Pilots of the U-2 reconnaissance plane are offered L pills when flying over Soviet territory in the 1950s. Most decline. CIA operatives get them anyway. The Cold War continues the tradition, but the Americans make theirs better. Saxitoxin in a pin, injectable neurotoxin in a coin. Francis Gary Powers, shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960, had one concealed in a silver dollar. He didn't use it, captured, interrogated, traded back to the U.S. in 1962. The capsule survived because Powers chose differently. The Nazis rarely did. What happened to the Gestapo's cyanide capsule stocks? The answer is uncomfortable. They were never stocks. They were personal effects, distributed individually, carried by choice, used in defeat. The Third Reich didn't collapse with armories full of poison waiting to be seized. It collapsed with poison in pockets, mouths, and hiding spots across Germany. The Allies found chemical weapons by the ton, nerve agents, mustard gas, industrial poisons, and destroyed them methodically. But the capsules, those were already consumed, in the Führer bunker, in prison cells, in forests where families chose death over Soviet occupation, up to 1,000 people in Demmin alone. Entire families. Parents giving children cyanide before taking their own. Mass graves found later. No capsule stockpile to seize. Just empty glass and brass in the hands of the dead. One final thread. The British manufacture their own suicide pills throughout the war. Special operations executive agents get them. Gray rubber coating, sewn into shirt collars, called cough drops by the agents. Sandy Rendell, an SOE operative, reports they contain cyanide that kills Org in a matter of minutes, if sucked, very painfully, and 3 to 4 hours if swallowed. Same concept, different supplier. The Allies and the Axis both understand some missions require an exit plan. When the war ends, Allied pills continue. Axis pills disappear with their users. The technology doesn't vanish, it transfers. CIA replaces cyanide with saxitoxin by the 1950s because of accidental exposure risks. South African Special Forces use cyanide capsules in the apartheid era. Dr. Wouter Basson is convicted in 2013 for providing them to operatives. The practice extends beyond World War II. It becomes doctrine, but the Nazi capsules specifically. They're consumed by May 1945. Today, museum curators handle the remaining examples with care. Not because they're still dangerous, potassium cyanide degrades over decades, but because of what they represent. A system where leaders prepared their followers for total defeat. Not military victory, not strategic retreat, just death. The capsules weren't strategic weapons. They were admissions. We will lose. When we do, this is your option. The Gestapo didn't maintain stocks because they didn't plan for surrender. They distributed poison because surrender wasn't the plan. The capsules were for the endgame. By May 1945, the endgame had arrived. In 2018, French researchers published findings in the European Journal of Internal Medicine after examining Hitler's teeth held in Russian archives. They confirm he died by cyanide and gunshot. The teeth show no evidence of long-term capsule storage in the mouth, contrary to hollow tooth myths. The capsule was held briefly, bitten quickly, confirming what witnesses reported. Hitler tested his capsule on his dogs, then used his gun as primary method. The capsule was backup. Standard procedure for someone who feared failure even in suicide. The stockpiles everyone asks about, they're in file cabinets, not poison cabinets. The real archives are purchase orders, contracts between chemical companies and SS procurement offices, shipping records, invoices for special pharmaceutical supplies. The paper trail exists, but it's boring. 300 capsules ordered, 50 issued to Heinrich Himmler's office, 25 to Gestapo headquarters in Berlin, 10 to regional SS commanders. The math suggests thousands total over 6 years. But there's no warehouse, no vault, just periodic manufacture and continuous distribution. By April 1945, most had been issued. By June, most had been used. The Allied investigators searched for many things in 1945. War criminals, gold stolen from Holocaust victims, art looted from museums, documents proving conspiracy, chemical weapons, nuclear research, rocket scientists. They catalog everything. But cyanide capsules? They're mentioned in passing, found on bodies, noted in medical examiner reports. Not rounded up systematically, not destroyed officially. They're too small, too scattered. The ones that survive do so by accident, in jacket pockets of unidentified corpses, in homes of families who fled, in the evidence bags of war crimes investigators who keep samples. Decades later, these samples end up donated to museums. The Imperial War Museums, the Topography of Terror in Berlin, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Each holds a few examples. Together, maybe a dozen confirmed capsules survive, of thousands manufactured. The rest fulfilled their purpose. One capsule changes history. October 15, 1946, Hermann Göring in Nuremberg. If he'd hanged, he'd have been one of 12 executed that night. Joachim von Ribbentrop, Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Rosenberg, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Hans Frank, Wilhelm Frick, Julius Streicher, Fritz Sockel, Alfred Jodl, Arthur Seyss Inquart, and 2 others, all hanged between 1 a.m. and 2:48 a.m. October 16. Göring cheats the rope at 22:44. October 15. His body is photographed, glass shards visible, potassium cyanide in his mouth. The capsule he used wasn't from a stockpile. It was smuggled, or hidden, or issued 11 months earlier and concealed perfectly. Either way, it worked. Death in 15 minutes. The hangman's noose left hanging. What happened to the Gestapo's cyanide capsule stocks after World War II? The Gestapo didn't have stocks. They had a distribution network. By May 1945, that network had consumed itself. The poison went where it was designed to go, into the mouths of those who feared justice more than death. No Allied task force rounded up suicide pills. No destruction program targeted them. They were already destroyed the only way that mattered. Used, the ones that remain are historical evidence, empty brass, shattered glass, museum pieces behind glass. proof that the Third Reich didn't plan for occupation. They planned for extinction. And when the end came, the poison did exactly what it was meant to do. It gave the guilty an exit. Quick, certain, final. The capsules didn't need to be seized after the war. They'd already completed their mission. The trail doesn't go cold in 1946. It splinters. The story of the Gestapo's Cyanide isn't just about its use in the final, fiery collapse of the Third Reich. It's about the silence that followed. The poison wasn't just a tool for the endgame. For some, it was a passport for the future. The question we answered was, what happened to the stockpiles? The answer was simple. There were no stockpiles, but that answer opens a new set of questions. What about the thousands of individual capsules that were not used in April and May of 1945? What about the men who carried them not into a bunker, but onto rat lines, into hiding, into new lives? And what about the psychology of a regime that armed its executioners with their own execution? The conspiracy is that the poison was controlled. The truth is that control was an illusion. The real story is what happens when the poison outlives the state that created it. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to our channel. It's how we continue this work. Let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. This script is based on documented history and drawing from post-war intelligence reports from the Counterintelligence Corps, academic studies on Nazi escape routes published in the journal Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and declassified CIA files on the recruitment of former Nazi personnel, specifically document number C001448. Now, let's return to the narrative. The year is 1947. Europe is a landscape of ghosts and rubble. The Nuremberg trials have concluded for the major war criminals, but thousands of others are missing. Gestapo officers, SS concentration camp administrators, doctors from the euthanasia programs, they have vanished, not into thin air. They have moved through channels, escape routes organized by sympathizers within the Catholic Church, most famously Bishop Alois Hudal in Rome. Networks of former SS members, these were the rat lines, a path from Germany, through Austria, to Italy, and then to ports like Genoa. From there, a boat to Argentina, to Egypt, to Syria. Did these fugitives carry the brass tube and glass ampule? The answer is complex. For a man on the run, a cyanide capsule is two things. It is an insurance policy, and it is a liability. Consider the case of Adolf Eichmann, SS Obersturmbannführer, the architect of the Holocaust's logistics, the man who managed the trains to Auschwitz. He escapes from an American internment camp in 1946. He spends years hiding in Germany and Italy. In 1950, he boards a ship for Argentina under the name Ricardo Clement. For 10 years, he lives a quiet life in Buenos Aires, working at a Mercedes-Benz factory, living in a house without electricity on Garibaldi Street. On May 11th, 1960, agents from the Israeli Mossad grab him as he gets off a bus. He is bundled into a car, sedated, smuggled out of the country on an El Al flight. During his capture and interrogation, he is searched repeatedly. There is no poison, no capsule hidden in a hollow tooth or sewn into his coat. He had over a decade to acquire one. He chose not to carry it. Why? This is the psychological shift after 1945. In the Führer bunker, suicide was a final act of performative loyalty. A Götterdämmerung, a twilight of the gods. In the suburbs of Buenos Aires, it was an inconvenience. Eichmann's goal was not a heroic death. It was survival. A capsule discovered during a random police check could expose him. A man carrying military-grade poison in 1955 is a man with a past. Eichmann, like many others, chose anonymity over a quick exit. He gambled on not being found. He lost. When he stood trial in Jerusalem in 1961, it was in a glass booth, not to protect him from assassins, but to protect the court from the potential of a smuggled poison, a final act of defiance. The Israelis understood the legacy of Nuremberg. They would not let Hermann Göring cheat their hangman. Eichmann was found guilty. He was hanged on June 1st, 1962. His body was cremated, his ashes scattered over the Mediterranean Sea, outside Israeli territorial waters. No grave, no shrine, no final word. Just the consequences he had outrun for 15 years. Contrast Eichmann with Josef Mengele, the angel of death from Auschwitz, the doctor who performed sadistic experiments on twins and dwarves, who sent hundreds of thousands to the gas chambers with a flick of his finger. Mengele escapes Germany. He uses the rat lines. He reaches Argentina in 1949. He lives openly for a time, even using his own name. When Eichmann is captured, Mengele panics. He flees to Paraguay, then to Brazil. He lives in constant fear of the Mossad. He is, by all accounts, a paranoid wreck. His son, Rolf, who visits him in 1977, reports that his father always carried a pistol, And according to some sources, he always had access to poison. Not a standard issue L pill, but cyanide acquired locally through his connections in the German expatriate communities. He never needed to use it. On February 7th, 1979, while swimming off a beach in Bertioga, Brazil, he suffers a stroke and drowns. His body is buried under the name Wolfgang Gerhard. The world hunts him for another 6 years before his remains are exhumed and identified in 1985. He died by accident, not by design. The poison was a talisman he carried against a fate that never came. These two cases reveal the splintering of the cyanide doctrine. For the first-tier Nazis in 1945, the capsule was an ideological statement. For the fugitives of the 1950s and 60s, it was a practical, stir, and often discarded tool. The network of distribution had dissolved. Now it was about who you knew. A chemist in Cairo, a pharmacist in Asuncion. The poison was the same, but the system was gone. It was replaced by an ad hoc, desperate supply chain for men living in the shadows. Let's talk about the other poisons. The script for the Nazi endgame wasn't limited to cyanide. German chemists were the most advanced in the world. In 1936, a chemist named Gerhard Schrader, working for IG Farben, was attempting to develop a better insecticide. He synthesized a compound he called Taben. It was lethally effective on insects. It was also lethally effective on humans. It was the world's first nerve agent. Schrader and his team would go on to synthesize sarin in 1938 and Soman in 1944. These G-series nerve agents were orders of magnitude more deadly than anything the Allies possessed. They attacked the nervous system, causing total respiratory paralysis, death in minutes from a single drop on the skin. The German military weaponized these agents. They produced over 12,000 tons of taboon. They filled artillery shells, bombs, and rockets with it, and they never used it. Hitler, himself a victim of a gas attack in World War I, was reportedly reluctant to initiate chemical warfare. He also believed, incorrectly, that the Allies had developed similar agents and would retaliate in kind. So the stockpiles sat. When the Allies overran Germany, they found mountains of nerve agent munitions. This was the chemical arsenal they systematically dumped into the sea. But the question remains, were these agents ever considered for personal suicide use? The evidence is thin. Nerve agents are volatile. They are difficult to contain safely in a small, portable device. A leaking cyanide capsule might produce a faint almond smell. A leaking taboon capsule could kill everyone in the room. Cyanide was simple. It was stable in its liquid potassium cyanide form. It was fast-acting. It was, in military terms, reliable. The G-series agents were strategic weapons, not personal tools. However, there are whispers. Post-war interrogations of Otto Skorzeny, the SS commando famous for rescuing Mussolini, suggest that special units were trained to use toxins for assassination. These included injectable poisons. The technology existed, but for the high command, the glass L pill remained the standard. It was brutally efficient. There was no need to innovate. The Old Death worked just fine. To understand why the capsule was so widely accepted, we have to look beyond the military leadership. We have to look at the German people. In the final weeks of the war, as the Red Army advanced from the east, a wave of mass suicide swept through German towns and cities. The most infamous example is the town of Demmin in Pomerania. Between April the 30th and May 3rd, 1945, as Soviet soldiers entered the town, hundreds of its citizens killed themselves. The exact number is unknown. Estimates range from 900 to over 2,500. They did it in every way imaginable. They shot themselves. They hanged themselves. They walked into the Peene River with rocks in their pockets. And many used poison. This wasn't an order from Berlin. It was a grassroots phenomenon, fueled by years of Goebbels' armed propaganda. The radio had told them the Soviets were subhuman beasts, that death was preferable to capture. The local Nazi party officials handed out cyanide capsules to those who asked. Pharmacists sold their remaining stocks. Parents poisoned their children, then themselves. One eyewitness reported seeing a woman mix poison into her children's porridge before eating it herself. This was the true legacy of the cyanide capsule. It wasn't just a tool for the guilty to escape justice. It was a weapon turned inward, on a population convinced by its leaders that annihilation was the only honorable end. The Götterdämmerung was not just for Hitler in his bunker. It was for the baker, the teacher, and the farmer in Demmin. They were the final consumers of the poison pipeline. Now, consider the counter-narrative. The men who had every reason to take the capsule, but chose to live. Albert Speer, Hitler's architect and minister of armaments. The man who kept the German war machine running years after it should have collapsed. He is arrested on May 23rd, 1945, along with Karl Donitz, the admiral Hitler named as his successor. Speer has no capsule. He never claims to have considered suicide. Instead, he prepares for his trial. At Nuremberg, he is the great enigma. He accepts responsibility, but only in a general, abstract sense. He claims ignorance of the Holocaust's full extent. He carefully crafts an image of himself as the good Nazi, the apolitical technocrat seduced by Hitler's charisma. It's a performance, and it works. While others hang, Speer receives a sentence of 20 years in prison. He serves his full term at Spandau prison in Berlin. He is released in 1966. He writes best-selling books. He gives interviews. He becomes a wealthy, respected figure, a historical celebrity. He dies of natural causes in London in 1981. Speer's choice to live demonstrates the limit of the suicide ideology. For him, personal survival and the chance to shape his own legacy were more important than a final, futile act of loyalty. He understood that history is written by the survivors. By not biting the capsule, he got to write his own chapter. A chapter that historians now see as largely self-serving and dishonest. But he wrote it. The dead cannot argue. And what of the physical objects themselves? The brass tubes, the glass vials? They enter a strange afterlife. Some become forensic evidence. Some become museum artifacts. And some become relics on a dark collector's market, or a poacher's market. Today, you can find replica cyanide capsules for sale online. They are marketed to historical reenactors and military enthusiasts. They are stamped with the same markings as the originals: Tesh U, Stabenow, Hamburg, and the contract number IMS S77/42. They are empty, of course, inert pieces of metal, but their existence speaks to a continued fascination with the aesthetics of the Third Reich. Originals are exceedingly rare and dangerous. In 2016, a curator at the Dutch Resistance Museum in Amsterdam was handling a collection of wartime artifacts. He came across a small metal box. Inside was a Nazi-era brass capsule container. He opened it. The glass ampule inside was still intact. An analysis confirmed it still contained liquid potassium cyanide. After more than 70 years, the poison was still viable. The capsule was carefully handed over to chemical weapons experts and neutralized. It's a stark reminder that this history is not entirely dead. The tools of that era still exist. They are sleeping in attics, in buried caches, and uncatalogued museum boxes. The hunt for the men who carried them also continues, even now. The Simon Wiesenthal Center still tracks down former Nazi guards and collaborators. In recent years, men in their 90s have been put on trial for crimes they committed in their 20s. John Demjanjuk, a guard at the Sobibor extermination camp, was convicted in 2011. Oskar Göring, the bookkeeper of Auschwitz, was convicted in 2015. These men did not have capsules. They, like Eichmann, gambled on disappearing into the quiet anonymity of post-war life. For decades, their gamble paid off. But justice has a long memory. The work of investigators and historians is to ensure that the world does not forget. To ensure that I was just following orders is never an excuse, and to demonstrate that there is no statute of limitations on crimes against humanity. So, where does this leave us? The story of the Nazi cyanide capsule is a fractal. The closer you look, the more complex it becomes. It begins as a simple military tool, a standard issue item for an elite circle. It becomes an ideological symbol in the final days of the war, a key to a glorious Wagnerian exit. It then becomes a practical, but risky tool for fugitives on the run. And finally, it becomes a historical artifact, a museum piece, a collector's item, a ghost. The true stockpile, as we concluded before, was never physical, it was psychological. It was a mindset manufactured in Berlin and distributed throughout the Reich, a belief that certain lives were worthless, that entire peoples could be erased, and that when the final accounting came, the perpetrators had a right to an easy exit, a way to avoid facing the consequences of their actions. The capsule was the ultimate expression of Nazi narcissism. The belief that they had the right to decide not only who lived and who died, but also the circumstances of their own death, cheating the judgment of the world they had plunged into chaos. One final story. In 1964, a group of German construction workers in Berlin were clearing a site near the former Reich Chancellery. They found a skeleton, then another, and another, a mass grave. Among the remains, they found the skeletons of 6 children, ranging in age from 4 to 12. Forensic analysis identified them as the children of Joseph and Magda Goebbels, Helga, Hildegard, Helmut, Holdine, Hedwig, and Heidrun. On May 1st, 1945, in the Führer bunker, their mother, Magda, had them poisoned. Some reports say they were given morphine-laced drinks to put them to sleep, and then a cyanide capsule was crushed in each of their mouths. After their children were dead, Joseph and Magda Goebbels walked up to the Chancellery Garden. He shot her, then shot himself. Other accounts say they both took cyanide. The details are murky. The result is not the children were not given a choice. They were not high-ranking officials facing trial. They were victims of an ideology so nihilistic, so bankrupt, that it consumed its own. That is the final destination of the poison pipeline, not in the mouth of Heinrich Himmler or Hermann Göring, but in the mouth of a 4-year-old girl, murdered by her own mother in a bunker as a world she never understood burned above her. There was no stockpile to seize after the war. The poison had already been delivered. It had already done its work, and its effects are still being felt today. The capsules are gone, but the poison of the ideology that created them still lingers, and that is a threat that can't be neutralized in a lab or dumped in the ocean. It has to be confronted. It has to be remembered. Always. This is not a story with a neat conclusion. It is a story of loose ends, of missing persons, of unanswered questions. The capsule is a perfect metaphor for the regime that produced it, a hard, metallic exterior. And inside, nothing but swift, silent, absolute poison. The mission for historians, and for all of us, is to continue to examine these relics, to understand not just how they worked, but why they existed at all, because the factories that produce the poison can always be rebuilt. The only true antidote is memory,